In this video, I'm going to be doing a teardown of a Sony Vaio 505X. I'll be replacing the spinning hard drive with a compact flash-based SSD solution. I'll also be removing the old CMOS battery and then finally giving a tour of the factory Japanese Windows 95 installation. I'll also be giving a tour of the factory Windows 98 English installation on a slightly newer 505 TS. Here I'll also show off the somewhat uncommon clip-on speakers for a sound quality test. Quick aside, as I've been doing this intro, I've been showing the virtual tour app that came preloaded on my Vaio 505 TS. I have a separate video just showing off this app. Now, some history and specs. The 505 series was the second series of Sony laptops to carry the Vaio branding. Initially released in 1997 in Japan, followed in 1998 in the US, this just followed the slightly larger Vaio 700 series. There were a few different redesigns. They all used the 505 name with different prefixes like the N505 or the Z505. The line finally came to an end in 2004 with the one-off X505 Extreme, an ultra-premium laptop that I've also done a video on. Let me quickly cover the specs of the two models I'll be showing today. The 505X has a 166 MHz Pentium CPU, a 10.4-inch 800 by 600 screen, 32 megabytes of RAM, a 2.1 GHz 2.5-inch IDE hard drive, and it came with Windows 95. My 505 TS is slightly newer with better specs. It has a 300 MHz Pentium MMX, a 1024 by 768 10.4-inch screen, 64 megs of RAM, a 6.4 GB hard drive, and Windows 98. Both models have Neo Magic Video, Sound Blaster Pro compatible audio, and were upgradable through proprietary memory modules. They weighed just over 3 pounds thanks to their magnesium alloy chassis. They carried Sony's super slim branding, coming in at just an inch thick. So now let's take a quick look at these two laptops, starting with the 505X. Up front we have our screen release slider and our status LEDs. Along the side we have our PC card slot, eject lever, our power button slider, and then our programmable power key, configurable through software, infrared port, and then the connectors for our detachable speakers. Just our battery along the back. We have our dial-up modem underneath this little cover. Underneath the I/O door, we have the connector for our port replicator. Next to it, the connector for the external floppy drive. Normally this would have a door on it. On the screen, you can see the outline of a compartment where you store the plastic stylus that you write on the trackpad with. Open it by pressing where it says push. And then our power, USB port, headphone, microphone jacks. You can see we have the classic Sony Vaio purple and gray color scheme. So next I'll show you my slightly more beat up 505 TS. By comparison, you can see they've added a FireWire iLink port. The speaker connectors are also a little different. Looks like due to the screen size being a little thicker, the slots where the speakers clip in are also a little larger on the older model. They don't seem to be interchangeable, with the SP5 being used on the older models and the SP51 on newer models. You can also see from the different sizes of the compartments for the styluses, this also changed between the models. For another comparison, this is a Toshiba Protege 3000 series laptop. This is another small 10-inch magnesium laptop, direct competitor to the Vaio. Let's take a quick look at the stock factory battery. I also have a larger capacity extended life battery. It's hinged, so you can either leave it flat or you can tilt it up to put your laptop at an angle. My mechanism here is a little damaged. We have our port replicator. This gives us our printer port, VGA port, PS2 mouse, keyboard, serial port. Next we have our external floppy drive. These use a Citizen W1D. I have a couple of these drives. Most of the belts have gone bad. I've done a separate video on how you can replace that belt. Now I'll show off the plastic stylus. It hides away in this little compartment tucked into the screen. Now these aren't touch screens. You're meant to draw on your trackpad with these pens. Switching to my TS to show off the detachable speakers. These clip onto the side of the screen. They get their connection through spring-loaded pogo pins. As I noted before, the mounting did change between models. Overall, they seem to be pretty rare. I've only ever seen them come up for sale twice. I'll have a demo and sound comparison at the end of this video. So let's get started with the teardown. We begin by flipping it over and removing the battery. Underneath this cover, we have the two proprietary memory modules. I didn't remove these, but here you can see what they would look like. Next, we need to remove the inner hinge covers. These are held on by a couple of clips, and we can just work them loose with a plastic spudger. Next, on the bottom, we have 8 screws to remove around the perimeter. There are 2 different sizes with a larger diameter in the corners. Now we can lift the top cover off, and we have to be really careful with this. As you can see on the top, we have the two keyboard ribbon cables, and they're really short. Along the bottom edge, we have another short ribbon cable, and this one for the trackpad. I'm only going to unplug the trackpad cable and just flip the cover up. Since this upgrade, I got a couple other 505s as untested parts machines. I could tell they've already been opened, and on one of them, one of the keyboard connectors was ripped off, and on the other one, as soon as I touched it, it also fell off. This may be atypical. It may just be the person who opened it up didn't really know what they were doing and just kind of reefed on it, damaged the connectors. I was able to solder them back on, but it wasn't fun, so just be careful with them. So now a piece of paper towel to protect the screen, and I'm flipping up the top cover. Next, prying up the old nickel metal battery held down by some double-sided tape. Now it's tricky to unplug the connector from the board. One of the slight differences between my X model here and a G model is the connector is fully on the other side of the board, so you can't really get a hold of it. Here I'm trying to grab it with some tweezers, instead of being accessible from the top like the G model. So my wires end up falling off here, kind of a sign that there's probably some corrosion. No damage to the board in this case. Off camera, I clean up the pins a little bit. Next up, we take out two screws to remove the old hard drive. We then tilt it a bit and remove the ribbon cable. And here's our Toshiba 2GB, 2.5 inch, 44 pin IDE drive. I'm not going to reuse the caddy. I'm using a 4GB industrial compact flash card and my compact flash to IDE adapter. Now you may run into problems if you use too large of a compact flash card. I'll cover more of that in the operating system section. going to stick some double-sided tape onto it. This first strip is more just a spacer. I'm not going to peel off the backing. It'll only be stuck down with a small square in the corner because I don't want to stick this down to that ribbon cable underneath it. Now, a quick note, these adapters have a tiny little activity LED on the side with the jumper in the corner. Normally this won't cause any issues, but in this case I had to open this back up and put a little piece of black electrical tape on it. That's because you can see the LED flashing through the gap around the mouse buttons. It's pretty distracting. So now to start the reassembly, we carefully flip the top cover back down and then reconnect the trackpad ribbon cable. Now we have to put two little plastic trim pieces back in. We have this on the left with our audio jacks, USB port, and power cable. And then right here we have the cover that goes over our infrared port. There's a tiny little clip in the middle, and that should face up. Next are 8 screws. Remember there's 2 different sizes. And finally, our inner hinge covers. So here I just want to show that the feet on my laptop are starting to disintegrate, at least they're not turning into goo. I'll link to a 3D model of replacement feet that you can print. I did mine in TPU, it's more rubber-like. And here they are after a little bit of glue, looks a lot better. One other thing I did is cover the battery pins on the laptop with some Kapton tape. A lot of these older Vaio laptops won't start if your main battery is dead, which most are at this point, and they look a bit weird missing their battery. Now, I haven't tested this myself, but I've since been told that if you replace the CMOS battery with a good new battery, that will also let you power on the laptop without having to cover these pins. Next up, since I have a loose 505G motherboard, I thought I'd get some close-up shots of both sides of the board. So now let's take a look at the BIOS and discuss installing an operating system. Since these are Windows 95, 98 machines, it's pretty simple to do a clean install by formatting your compact flash card with Rufus as a bootable drive, then copying the contents of your Windows installation CD into a folder. You can then boot your Vaio and start the setup program. My 505TS had factory recovery media available on archive.org. That was a simple installation. I couldn't find anything for my Japanese 505X. A copy did come up on a Japanese auction site, so I bought it, even though it ended up costing more than the laptop itself. I've uploaded that to archive.org. I've also uploaded a ghost image just after the factory recovery, so you can write it to your compact flash card before installation. It's also useful if you want to do a factory recovery but don't have a CD-ROM drive, or you have a similar 505 that would otherwise fail the model check during installation. Quick note on the 505X, when I initially installed I had an 8GB compact flash card, and although the recovery seemed to work, once I rebooted, it wouldn't start. I swapped it for a 4GB compact flash card, and that worked fine. I also noticed in the BIOS it didn't really like my 8GB card, so I think this is a BIOS limitation on this older model. So now let's take a look at Windows 95 on my 505X. I have mine set up to do boot between a factory installation of Windows 95 in Japanese and then a clean install of Windows 98 in English. First up, we have Sapari Coast. We can't do much with this now, but this was originally an online community based on Java, VRML, where you could chat with other users with a human or animal avatar. Next, we have Sony Notebook setup. This gives some basic stats on the laptop and replicates configuring a lot of settings that you could also configure through the BIOS. This looks to be a scripting macro tool to automate tasks. Zoomed out a bit here so I can show off Scriblepad next. This is the tool that lets you draw using the plastic stylus on the trackpad. We have to hit a key to toggle into draw mode. Then we also have a writing program, also based around the stylus and the trackpad. Powering down, and then I'll show you my other Vaio. So now let's take a look at the factory Windows 98 installation on my 505 TS. Checking out the included documentation. Adobe Photo Deluxe, which lets you touch up and add effects to images. We have Sony Notebook Setup again, this time in English. Again, this replicates functions that you can set in your BIOS. We have programmable power key setup. This lets you use the special PPK hardware button in combination with a keystroke to open different applications like your email or your web browser. They're configured with a delay by default. I guess they're worried about people accidentally hitting it or something. Here I'm testing the button to open my email. I'll just cancel out of this. System configuration. This looks like some pretty basic details. Haven't really seen this on too many other BIOS. So now I'm going to do some comparison tests between the built-in speakers and the detachable speakers. Turned off my noise cancellation so it doesn't distort anything. I'll just let you listen to these. Try some MIDI playback now. Here's the 505 virtual tour. I showed a bit of this in the intro. I also have a separate video with the full 5-minute demo. But that's it. Thanks for watching.